A love built on dreams. Victoria Hayes stood in the showroom of Sterling Tower, adjusting the placement of a vintage crystal chandelier that caught the afternoon light perfectly. Her designs had transformed the executive floor into something between modern elegance and timeless comfort. Every detail reflected her signature style, the kind that had earned her recognition throughout the city despite being only 29 years old. She stepped back to admire her work when strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Nathan Sterling rested his chin on her shoulder, and she could feel his smile against her cheek. "You're making my building look too good," he murmured. "Clients are going to want to move in permanently." Victoria laughed, leaning into his embrace. That was the idea. Happy clients mean happy investors. They had been together for 8 months, though it felt like a lifetime and a heartbeat all at once. Nathan had hired her firm to redesign Sterling Enterprises after a merger, and their professional relationship had quickly become something neither could ignore. He was different from what she expected. Yes, he was wealthy and powerful, but he was also kind, genuinely interested in her thoughts, and made her laugh until her sides ached. "My mother wants to meet you," Nathan said, his tone shifting slightly. "This weekend. Dinner at the estate." Victoria turned in his arms to face him. She had been avoiding this conversation for weeks. Margaret Sterling was legendary in business circles, known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. The woman had built half of Sterling Enterprises alongside her late husband and maintained iron control over the family legacy. "Are you sure she's ready for that?" Victoria asked carefully. Nathan cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Victoria. My mother needs to understand that you're part of my life now. Part of my future." Those words made her heart soar and terrify her in equal measure. She had never felt this way about anyone. Nathan wasn't just her partner but her best friend, her safe place in a chaotic world. "Okay," she whispered. "This weekend." The weight of the past. 2 days before the dinner, Victoria visited her childhood home to collect some furniture for her apartment. Her mother had recently moved to a smaller place, and Victoria was helping sort through decades of accumulated belongings. In the attic, buried beneath old photo albums and holiday decorations, she found a wooden box with her grandmother's name carved into the lid. Inside were letters, photographs, and a leather journal with brittle, yellowed pages. Victoria sat on the dusty floor and began to read. Her grandmother's handwriting chronicled a love affair that had consumed her life. The man's name appeared on every page. Thomas Sterling. Her hands trembled as she read further. Thomas Sterling had been Nathan's grandfather. The affair had lasted 3 years, ending only when Thomas died in a plane crash. But the journal revealed something more devastating. Her grandmother claimed that Victoria's mother had been Thomas Sterling's daughter, born from their secret relationship. The room spun around her. If this was true, then she and Nathan were related. The love she felt, the future they planned, everything became twisted and wrong in an instant. She grabbed her phone to call her mother, then stopped. Her mother had never known the truth about her father. She had grown up believing the story about a man who died before she was born. This secret had been kept for over 50 years. Victoria spent the night reading and rereading the journal, searching for any indication that her grandmother might have been mistaken. But the dates aligned, the details were specific, and there were photographs of Thomas that bore an unmistakable resemblance to Nathan. The confrontation. Victoria arrived at the Sterling estate on Saturday evening, the journal hidden in her bag like a bomb waiting to explode. She had barely slept in 2 days, torn between telling Nathan immediately and verifying the information first. Margaret Sterling answered the door herself, a calculated power move that put Victoria immediately on edge. The older woman was elegant in a cream silk blouse and tailored slacks, her silver hair swept back in a perfect chignon. "Miss Hayes," Margaret said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "How lovely to finally meet you. Nathan is running late from a meeting. Why don't we have a drink while we wait?" Victoria followed her into a sitting room filled with priceless antiques and family portraits. Margaret poured 2 glasses of wine and settled into a chair across from Victoria. "I understand you've been seeing my son for several months now," Margaret began, her tone conversational but her gaze sharp. "Tell me about yourself. Your family background." Victoria's heart raced. "There's not much to tell. I grew up in a small town, went to design school, started my own firm 5 years ago." "And your parents?" "My father died when I was young. My mother raised me alone." Margaret's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "How interesting. My investigators told me the same thing. They also discovered something you might find relevant." She produced a folder from beside her chair and slid it across the coffee table. Victoria's blood ran cold as she opened it to find copies of the same journal entries she had been reading for days, along with additional documents, birth certificates, DNA analysis reports, and photographs she had never seen. "I know who you are," Margaret said quietly, all pretense of politeness gone. "I know about your grandmother's relationship with my father-in-law. I know that your mother is his biological daughter. Which means you and Nathan are first cousins." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face before she realized she was crying. "I just found out. I was going to tell him tonight." "Were you?" Margaret's voice was cold steel. "Or were you going to continue this relationship, perhaps hoping to secure your financial future through marriage to a man you cannot legally or morally be with?" "No. I love Nathan. I would never." "Love," Margaret interrupted, "is not enough when biology stands in the way. Do you understand what this would do to him? Learning that his grandfather betrayed his grandmother? That the woman he loves is his own blood relative? It would destroy him." Victoria knew she was right. Nathan had idolized his grandfather, had built his business philosophy on stories of the man's integrity and vision. This truth would shatter everything he believed. "What do you want me to do?" Victoria whispered. Margaret leaned forward. "Leave. Tonight. Send him a message saying the relationship moved too fast, that you need space, that you've accepted a position in another city. Whatever story you prefer. In exchange, I will ensure you receive financial support. Enough to start fresh somewhere new. I can't just disappear. He deserves an explanation. He deserves to remember your relationship as something beautiful, not something tainted by this horrible truth. If you truly love my son, you will give him that gift." The impossible choice. Victoria sat in her car outside the estate for over an hour, her phone filled with increasingly worried texts from Nathan. He had arrived home to find her gone and his mother claiming she had left without explanation. Her hand moved to her stomach. She had taken the pregnancy test that morning, unable to deny the signs any longer. She was carrying Nathan's child, a child who could never know their father, a child born from a love that never should have existed. Owen Fletcher found her there at midnight, sitting in the dark parking lot. Her best friend since childhood had always known when she needed him. She had sent him a single text. "Help me." "What happened?" Owen asked, sliding into the passenger seat. Through broken sobs, Victoria told him everything. The journal, Margaret's evidence, the pregnancy, the impossible situation she faced. "Come home with me tonight," Owen said firmly. "Stay with my family while you figure this out. Then we'll help you start over somewhere new if that's what you need." "I can't tell you why I'm leaving," Victoria managed. "Nathan will ask. Everyone will ask. I can't explain." "Then don't," Owen said simply. "Just let me help you disappear." The departure. At 3 a.m, Victoria packed a single suitcase with essentials. She left behind the apartment Nathan had helped her decorate, the sketches for their dream home they had been planning, and the engagement ring he had secretly shown her best friend he was planning to propose with next month. She wrote a letter, then rewrote it a dozen times. Finally, she settled on something brief and painfully vague. Nathan, I need to leave. This relationship moved faster than I was ready for, and I've accepted a position that will take me away from the city. Please don't try to find me. I need space to figure out my life. I'm sorry. Victoria. As Owen drove her away from the city where she had built her dreams, Victoria watched the skyline disappear in the rearview mirror. Somewhere in those buildings was Nathan, the man she loved more than she thought possible to love anyone. He would wake up to her letter and spend years wondering what he had done wrong, never knowing that she was protecting him from a truth more painful than her absence. The aftermath. Margaret Sterling stood at her bedroom window as the sun rose over Boston. She had won, as she always did. Her son would be hurt, but he would recover. The family name would remain untainted by scandal. She looked down at the folder of evidence in her hands. The documents were real, the DNA analysis legitimate. What she hadn't told Victoria was that the analysis had been incomplete. There were questions about contamination, inconsistencies in the timeline that a more thorough investigation might have revealed. But Margaret had learned long ago that absolute certainty was less important than absolute control. She had protected her son from a potentially devastating truth. That was what mothers did. Deep in a place she refused to acknowledge, a small voice whispered that she might have been wrong. She silenced it quickly and returned the folder to her safe, where it would remain hidden for years to come. A new beginning in the rain. The rain fell steadily against the windows of Victoria Hayes' design studio, a modest office space in downtown Seattle that Victoria had built from nothing over the past 4 years. She stood at her drafting table, reviewing floor plans for a boutique hotel renovation, while her daughter Lily sat at the small desk in the corner, coloring with intense concentration. Victoria had chosen Seattle deliberately. It was far enough from Boston that unexpected encounters were unlikely, yet close enough to major markets that she could rebuild her career. The city's gray skies matched her mood those first months, but gradually she had found a rhythm in the rain, a kind of peace in starting over. Mommy, does this look like a castle? Lily held up her drawing, her blue eyes bright with pride. Those eyes were Nathan's eyes, a constant reminder of everything Victoria had lost and everything she had gained. It's perfect, sweetheart, Victoria said, kneeling beside her daughter. At 4 years old, Lily was curious, creative, and filled with a joy that made Victoria's heart ache with love and guilt in equal measure. The door chimed, and Rebecca Torres entered, shaking water from her umbrella. Rebecca lived in the apartment next to Victoria's and had become her closest friend in Seattle. A divorce lawyer with a sharp wit and a generous heart, Rebecca had helped Victoria navigate the challenges of single motherhood without ever pushing for details about Lily's father. Traffic is horrible out there, Rebecca announced, setting down a carrier with 2 coffee cups. I brought reinforcements. Also, your landlord called. The lease renewal papers are ready. Victoria accepted the coffee gratefully. Lease renewals, business permits, school registrations. Her life had become a careful construction of normalcy, each day another brick in the wall she had built between her past and present. Thank you, Victoria said. I don't know what I would do without you. Probably survive just fine, but less caffeinated, Rebecca smiled. Then her expression grew serious. Speaking of survival, you had a visitor at the building this morning. A man was asking the doorman about you. Corporate type, expensive suit. Victoria's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Did he leave a name? No, but the doorman said he had an East Coast accent. When he realized you weren't home, he left without pressing the issue. 4 years of careful invisibility suddenly felt fragile. Victoria had changed her business name slightly, used her mother's maiden name for personal documents, and maintained minimal social media presence. But she had always known that someone with enough resources could find her eventually. It's probably nothing, Victoria said, not believing her own words. Maybe a potential client. Rebecca's expression suggested she wasn't convinced, but she let it drop. Lily, want to come to my office for a bit? I have a new puzzle we can work on while your mom finishes her designs. After they left, Victoria stood at the window, watching the rain blur the city streets. She had built a good life here. Her business was growing steadily, she had genuine friendships, and Lily was thriving. But the foundation of this life was built on a lie, and lies had a way of crumbling when pressure was applied. The unexpected visitor. 3 days later, Owen Fletcher appeared at her office door. Victoria nearly dropped the coffee she was holding when she saw him standing there, older and more serious than she remembered, but unmistakably her oldest friend. "Owen," she breathed. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he said quietly, glancing at Lily, who was watching curiously from her corner. "Somewhere private." Victoria's hands shook as she called Rebecca to watch Lily, then led Owen to a small coffee shop 2 blocks away. They sat in a back booth, and for a long moment, neither spoke. "You look good," Owen finally said. "I'm glad you found your footing." "How did you find me?" Victoria asked, though part of her had always known this moment would come. "I've always known where you were," Owen admitted. "I promised not to tell anyone, and I kept that promise. But things have changed, Victoria. Nathan is looking for you. He's been looking since the day you left." Victoria closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "Owen, you know I can't." "I hired a private investigator," Owen interrupted. 6 months ago. I couldn't accept that you would just abandon someone you loved so completely without a real reason. I thought maybe Nathan had hurt you somehow, or his mother had threatened you. I needed to understand." "You had no right," Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. Owen pulled out a thick manila envelope and placed it on the table between them. "I found out about the journal. About your grandmother and Thomas Sterling. About what Margaret told you that night." Victoria's throat tightened. "Then you understand why I had to leave. Why I can never go back." "Actually, I don't understand," Owen said firmly. "Because my investigator found something Margaret Sterling either didn't know or deliberately hid from you. Victoria, the evidence she showed you was wrong." Victoria stared at him, unable to process his words. "That's impossible. I saw the DNA analysis, the birth certificates, the timeline." "The timeline was manipulated," Owen said, opening the envelope. "Your grandmother did have an affair with Thomas Sterling. That part was true. But your mother wasn't his biological daughter. She was born 6 months before your grandmother even met Thomas. The investigator found your grandmother's original medical records from the hospital where your mother was born. Thomas Sterling was in Europe on business during the entire period when your mother would have been conceived." He spread documents across the table. Hospital records, immigration stamps, business travel logs. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Thomas Sterling could not have been Victoria's grandfather. "But Margaret had DNA results," Victoria whispered, her world tilting on its axis. "Contaminated or fabricated," Owen said. "The lab that processed those results doesn't even exist anymore. My investigator tried to track it down. The address was a vacant lot." "Victoria, I think Margaret either convinced herself of something that wasn't true, or she deliberately constructed a lie to drive you away from Nathan." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. For years. For years of running, of keeping Lily from her father, of denying herself the love she still felt with every breath. All based on a lie. Why would she do this? Victoria asked, though she already knew the answer. Margaret Sterling was a woman who valued control above everything else. A woman who would sacrifice anything to maintain her vision of how the world should be. "I think she saw you as a threat to her influence over Nathan," Owen said gently. "And she found the most devastating weapon she could to eliminate that threat." Victoria looked down at the documents, evidence of a truth that changed everything and nothing simultaneously. "Where is Nathan now?" Owen's expression grew somber. That's why I'm here. Nathan never stopped looking for you. He hired investigators, searched every database, contacted everyone who ever knew you. The pressure destroyed his relationship with his mother. He resigned from Sterling Enterprises 2 years ago because he couldn't work with her anymore. Last I heard, he was living in a small town in Vermont, running a non-profit that builds affordable housing. The image of Nathan, powerful and confident in his executive office, shattered in Victoria's mind. She had hurt him far worse than Margaret's revelation ever could have. He doesn't know about Lily, Victoria said quietly. I figured as much, Owen replied. Which means you have a choice to make. You can keep running, keep building this life you've created here. Or you can face your past and tell him the truth. All of it. The decision. That night, Victoria sat on the floor of her daughter's room, watching Lily sleep. The little girl clutched a stuffed elephant Nathan had won at a carnival during one of their dates. Victoria had packed it in her desperate flight 4 years ago, unable to leave behind every piece of him. Rebecca found her there an hour later, tears streaming silently down her face. Without a word, Rebecca sat beside her, offering the kind of quiet support that required no explanation. I ran away based on a lie, Victoria finally whispered. I kept his daughter from him because I believed something that wasn't true. How do I come back from that? You start by telling him the truth, Rebecca said simply. You explain what happened, what you were told, and why you made the choices you made. Then you let him decide what comes next. What if he hates me? What if he can't forgive what I've done? Rebecca took Victoria's hand. What if he doesn't? What if he's been waiting 4 years for the chance to understand? You'll never know unless you're brave enough to find out. Nathan's search. In a small Vermont town called Riverside, Nathan Sterling sat in his modest office at Hope Housing Initiative, reviewing construction plans for a new community center. The work was meaningful, but it filled only a small portion of the emptiness that had consumed him since Victoria disappeared. The first year had been the worst. He had been angry, convinced she had used him and discarded him when something better came along. But as investigators found no evidence of another relationship, no trail of ambition or betrayal, his anger had turned to confusion and then to obsession. He had discovered his mother's private files by accident, searching for old business documents in her study. The folder on Victoria had been hidden in a safe, but Nathan knew his father's old combination. Inside were investigation reports detailing Victoria's pregnancy, records of financial transfers, and notes about a meeting the night she disappeared. The confrontation with Margaret had been brutal. She claimed she was protecting him, that Victoria had been after his money, that everything she did was for his own good. But Nathan had seen through the justifications to the control underneath. His mother had driven away the woman he loved, and in doing so, had destroyed any trust between them. He had walked away from Sterling Enterprises, from the legacy he was supposed to carry forward, from the life Margaret had carefully constructed for him. In Riverside, he had found purpose in building homes for families who needed them, but he had never found peace. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The private investigator he kept on retainer, more out of habit than hope after 4 years of dead ends. Mr. Sterling, I found her, the investigator said without preamble. Victoria Hayes is living in Seattle under a slightly modified business name. She owns a small design firm. And sir, there's something else. She has a daughter. 4 years old. Nathan's world stopped spinning. A daughter. Victoria had been pregnant when she left, carrying his child, and she had faced that alone for 4 years. Send me the address, Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm going to Seattle. The preparation. Victoria spent a week preparing for what she knew she had to do. She arranged for Rebecca to watch Lily, booked a flight to Vermont, and practiced what she would say 1,000 different ways. None of them felt adequate for the magnitude of what she needed to confess. Owen offered to come with her, but she declined. This was something she needed to do alone, to face Nathan and accept whatever judgment he passed on her choices. The night before her flight, she sat down and wrote a letter to Lily, something her daughter could read when she was older and could understand the complexity of what had happened. In it, she tried to explain love and fear, truth and lies, the impossible choices people sometimes face. "I made mistakes," she wrote, "but you were never one of them. You are the best part of a love that was real, even though I didn't trust it enough to fight for it. I hope someday you'll understand, and I hope even more that you'll never have to face the kind of choice I thought I was making." She sealed the letter and placed it in her safe deposit box, hoping Lily would never need to read it, praying that the next few days would lead to something better than the fear and isolation that had defined the past 4 years. As she packed her bag for Vermont, Victoria's phone rang with an unknown number. Her heart raced as she answered. "Victoria?" The voice was one she heard in her dreams, deeper than she remembered but unmistakably Nathan's. "Don't hang up. I know where you are. I know about Lily. I'm at the airport in Seattle right now, and I need to see you. We need to talk about everything." Victoria sank onto her bed, tears streaming down her face. After 4 years of running, Nathan had found her. And instead of the confrontation she feared, his voice held only exhaustion and desperate hope. "I'm at 412 Harbor View," she whispered. "3rd floor. Nathan, I'm so sorry. For everything. We'll figure it out," he said, and she could hear tears in his voice too. "Just don't run again. Please don't run." The reunion. Victoria stood at her apartment window, watching the street below as rain continued its steady rhythm against the glass. Every car that passed made her heart jump, every shadow in the dim streetlight made her breath catch. Nathan was coming. After 4 years of absence, of silence, of carrying the weight of her choices alone, he was minutes away. She had changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on simple jeans and a soft sweater. Nothing she wore would make this easier. Nothing could prepare her for seeing the man she had never stopped loving, the man whose child slept peacefully in the next room, unaware that her entire world was about to shift. Rebecca had offered to stay, but Victoria had declined. This conversation needed to happen without witnesses, without buffers between the truth and its consequences. A black car pulled up to the curb, and Victoria watched as Nathan stepped out. Even from 3 floors up, even in the rain-blurred darkness, she would have known him anywhere. He was thinner than she remembered, his shoulders carrying a tension that hadn't been there before. He stood for a moment looking up at her building, and she wondered what he was feeling, what thoughts raced through his mind. Victoria buzzed him up when he rang, then stood frozen by the door, listening to his footsteps climbing the stairs. Each step brought him closer to truths that would either heal or destroy whatever remained between them. The knock was soft, almost hesitant. Victoria opened the door, and for a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Nathan's eyes held exhaustion and pain, but also something that made her throat tighten with emotion. Hope. "Hello, Victoria," he said quietly. "Hello, Nathan." They stood in the doorway like strangers, these 2 people who had once known each other's every thought, who had planned a future that never came to be. Then Nathan's careful control crumbled, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she might disappear again if he let go. Victoria buried her face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling 4 years of loneliness and grief pour out in silent tears. They stood that way for minutes that felt like hours, 2 broken people trying to remember how their pieces had once fit together. The truth unfolds. They sat on Victoria's small couch, close but not touching, the space between them filled with questions neither knew how to ask. Nathan's eyes kept drifting to the photographs on the wall, pictures of Lily at various ages, a chronicle of the years he had missed. "Tell me everything," Nathan said finally. "Start from the beginning. The real beginning." Victoria took a shaking breath and began. She told him about finding her grandmother's journal, about the affair with Thomas Sterling, about the devastating conclusion she had reached. She described the dinner at his mother's estate, the folder of evidence, the DNA analysis that seemed to prove they were related. Margaret gave me an ultimatum, Victoria said, her voice breaking. Leave quietly, or she would destroy me and tell you a truth that would shatter everything you believed about your family. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing the right thing. Nathan's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained steady. My mother has always believed that control equals love. That protecting someone means making their choices for them. I'm so sorry she did this to you. To us. There's more, Victoria whispered. She told him about the pregnancy test she had taken the morning after her meeting with Margaret, about discovering she was carrying his child just as she was preparing to leave forever. I couldn't tell you. How could I explain why I was leaving if I told you about the baby? You would have fought for us, and I believed that would have destroyed you. Nathan stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His shoulders shook, and Victoria realized he was crying, the kind of deep, silent tears that came from a grief too large for words. I have a daughter, he said finally, turning to face her. A 4-year-old daughter I've never met. 4 years of birthdays, of first words, of everything. Gone. Because my mother lied and you believed her. The accusation in his words stung, but Victoria knew she deserved it. I'm so sorry. I should have questioned the evidence more carefully. I should have trusted what we had. But Nathan, I was terrified. The thought that we might be related, that our love was wrong, it paralyzed me. And your mother was so certain, so prepared with proof. She wasn't certain, Nathan said bitterly. I found her files 2 years ago when I was searching for any clue about where you had gone. The DNA analysis she showed you came from a lab that no longer exists. The timeline she presented was manipulated. She either convinced herself of something that wasn't true, or she deliberately constructed a lie because she saw you as a threat to her control over me. Victoria felt fresh tears on her cheeks. Owen told me. He hired an investigator who found the truth. That's why I was planning to come to Vermont tomorrow. To find you and tell you everything. Nathan crossed the room in 2 strides and took her hands in his. We've lost 4 years because of lies and fear. I don't want to lose any more time. I want to meet my daughter. I want to know everything about her. And Victoria, I need to know if there's any chance for us. If what we had is still there somewhere underneath all this pain. I never stopped loving you, Victoria said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Every day for 4 years, I've thought about you. I see you in Lily's eyes, in her smile, in the way she draws buildings instead of flowers. I've told myself I did the right thing, but the truth is I was a coward. I ran instead of fighting for us. Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. You were scared and alone, facing an impossible situation. My mother is a master manipulator who used your love for me as a weapon against you. You're not a coward, Victoria. You're one of the strongest people I know. Meeting Lily. The next morning, Victoria woke Lily gently, her heart pounding with nervousness and hope. Nathan had spent the night in a hotel, giving them both time to process everything that had been said. They had agreed to meet for breakfast, and Victoria would introduce Lily to her father. Sweetheart, we have someone special to meet this morning, Victoria said, smoothing Lily's dark curls. Someone who loves you very much and has been waiting a long time to know you. Lily's blue eyes widened with curiosity. Is it Santa Claus? Victoria laughed despite her nerves. No, baby. It's your daddy. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the seriousness only a 4-year-old could muster. Does he like elephants? Because I really like elephants. He won the elephant you sleep with every night, Victoria said, tears threatening again. A long time ago, before you were born. They met at a small diner near Victoria's apartment, the kind of place with worn booths and the smell of coffee and pancakes. Nathan arrived first, and Victoria could see the tension in every line of his body as they entered. Then his eyes found Lily, and his expression transformed into something between joy and heartbreak. Lily held tight to Victoria's hand, suddenly shy in the face of this stranger who looked at her with such intensity. Nathan knelt down to be at her level, his eyes swimming with tears he was trying to hold back. "Hi, Lily," he said softly. "I'm Nathan. I'm your dad." Lily studied him carefully, her small face serious. "You have the same eyes as me," she observed. "Mommy says I have special eyes." "You do have special eyes," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "The most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. Your mommy is right about that." "Do you really like elephants?" Lily asked, apparently deciding this was the most important question. Nathan smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his tears. "I love elephants. And I'd really love to hear about all the things you like. Maybe we could spend today together, getting to know each other?" Lily looked up at Victoria, seeking permission. Victoria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll be right here with you." Over pancakes and orange juice, Lily gradually warmed to Nathan. She showed him her drawings, told him about her best friend at preschool, and demonstrated how high she could count. Nathan listened to every word as though she was sharing the secrets of the universe, his love for this child he had just met written clearly on his face. "Can you come to the park with us?" Lily asked suddenly. "Mommy said we could go to the park today if it stops raining." Nathan looked at Victoria, hope and uncertainty in his expression. "I would love that. If it's okay with your mom." "It's more than okay," Victoria said. Confronting the past. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep exhausted from a day of playing with her father, Nathan and Victoria sat on her small balcony, watching the city lights blur in the rain. "I need to confront my mother," Nathan said quietly. "She needs to understand what her actions cost us." "What they cost Lily?" Victoria nodded. "I know. But Nathan, I need to own my part in this too. I could have questioned the evidence more carefully. I could have trusted our love enough to talk to you before running. I made choices based on fear, and those choices hurt all of us." "We both made mistakes," Nathan said, taking her hand. "You out of fear, me out of ignorance. I should have seen what my mother was capable of. I should have fought harder to find you in those early days instead of letting anger blind me. We could spend years cataloging everything we did wrong, or we could choose to move forward." "What does moving forward look like?" Victoria asked. Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious. "It looks like building trust again. Getting to know each other as the people we've become, not just the people we were 4 years ago. It looks like co-parenting Lily and giving her the stability she deserves. And if we're lucky, if we can find our way back to what we had, it looks like becoming a family." "I want that," Victoria whispered. "But I'm scared. What if we can't get past everything that's happened? What if the damage is too deep?" "Then we'll deal with it together," Nathan said firmly. "I'm not running, and I'm not letting you run either. We face this head-on, with honesty and patience and a commitment to trying. That's all I'm asking for. A real chance." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in 4 years. "A real chance. I can do that." The confrontation with Margaret. 2 weeks later, Victoria and Nathan stood outside the Stirling estate in Boston. Lily was safe with Rebecca in Seattle, and they had come to face the woman whose lies had stolen 4 years of their lives. Margaret Stirling answered the door herself, her face going pale when she saw them standing together. "Nathan, I wasn't expecting you. And Miss Hayes. What a surprise." "We need to talk, Mother," Nathan said, his voice cold. "And this time, you're going to tell the truth." They sat in the same drawing room where Victoria's world had shattered 4 years earlier. Margaret maintained her composure, but Victoria could see fear flickering in her eyes. "I know what you did," Nathan began. "I know how you manipulated evidence to convince Victoria that we were related. I know about the fabricated DNA analysis, the altered timeline, the lies you told to drive her away." "I was protecting you," Margaret said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "That woman was after your money, your position. I did what any mother would do." "No," Nathan said firmly. "You did what a controlling, manipulative person does when they're afraid of losing power. Victoria loved me. She left because she believed she was protecting me from a painful truth. A truth that turned out to be a lie. And because of your actions, I missed 4 years of my daughter's life. 4 years I can never get back." Margaret's carefully maintained composure cracked. "You have a daughter?" "A beautiful, brilliant 4-year-old named Lily," Victoria said, speaking for the first time. "She asks about her grandmother sometimes." I haven't known how to answer because the woman who should fill that role chose manipulation over love, control over trust. "I thought I was doing what was best," Margaret whispered, and for the first time, Victoria saw genuine regret in the older woman's eyes. "I convinced myself that the evidence was real, that I was saving Nathan from making a terrible mistake. But the truth is, I was terrified of losing my son to someone I couldn't control." "You didn't lose me to Victoria," Nathan said. "You lost me because of what you did to her. To us. I walked away from Sterling Enterprises, from this family, from everything you tried to build for me, because I couldn't be the person you wanted me to be and still live with myself." Margaret stood, moving to the window with her back to them. Her shoulders shook with silent tears. "What do you want from me? An apology? My acknowledgement that I destroyed something precious? You have both. I was wrong. I let my need for control poison everything I claimed to love. I want you to understand what you did," Nathan said, his voice softer now but no less firm. "I want you to carry that understanding with you every day. And I want you to know that if you ever want to be part of Lily's life, part of our lives, you'll have to earn that privilege. Trust isn't given freely anymore. It has to be rebuilt, piece by piece." Victoria watched Margaret Sterling, this powerful woman who had seemed so invincible 4 years ago, crumble under the weight of her choices. Part of her felt satisfaction, but mostly she felt sadness for the years all of them had lost to fear and pride. "I would like the chance to earn that trust," Margaret said finally, turning to face them. "I would like to meet my granddaughter, if you'll allow it. Not now, I understand that. But someday, when you're ready. I want to try to be better than I've been." Nathan looked at Victoria, letting her share in the decision. She thought about Lily, about the importance of family, about the power of forgiveness and second chances. "Someday," Victoria agreed. "When we're all ready. When we've built something strong enough to withstand the weight of the past. Building a future." 6 months later, Victoria stood in the backyard of a house in Portland, Oregon, watching Nathan push Lily on a swing set he had built himself. They had chosen Portland as a compromise between Seattle and Boston, a place where they could build something new together. Victoria's design firm had opened a second office, and Nathan had started a nonprofit focused on sustainable housing development. They were creating lives that honored who they had become during their years apart while making space for who they could be together. Their relationship was different now. They moved more slowly, communicated more carefully, and built their foundation on honesty rather than assumption. Some days were hard, filled with echoes of the pain they had caused each other. But most days were good, filled with laughter and hope and the simple joy of being together. Lily had adjusted remarkably well to having a father in her life. She split her time between both parents, though they lived in the same neighborhood and had dinner together most nights. They weren't rushing toward marriage or trying to recreate what they had lost. Instead, they were building something new, something stronger for having been tested. Margaret visited once a month, always with permission, always respecting the boundaries they set. She brought Lily books about architecture and took her to museums. The relationship was tentative, marked by the careful steps of people learning to trust after betrayal. But it was real, and it was growing. Owen came for dinner that evening, bringing his new girlfriend and a bottle of wine. As they sat around the table, Lily chattering happily about her day, Victoria felt Nathan's hand find hers under the table. She squeezed back, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had overcome and everything they still had to face. "Thank you," Nathan said later, after everyone had gone home and Lily was asleep. They sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the clear night sky. "Thank you for coming back. For giving us this chance." "Thank you for finding me," Victoria replied. "For not giving up, even when you had every reason to." "I love you," Nathan said, the words simple but weighted with 4 years of longing. "I never stopped, even when I was angry, even when I thought I'd never see you again. I loved you then, and I love you now." "I love you too," Victoria said. "I think I always will." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had learned that love wasn't always enough but that with trust, honesty, and commitment, it could be the beginning of something lasting. They had lost years to lies and fear, but they had found their way back to each other. And this time, they were holding on with everything they had. The promise. A year later, Nathan knelt in the backyard where he had first watched Lily play, this time with his daughter beside him. Victoria came outside to find them both looking at her with matching grins and conspirators' eyes. "Mommy, Daddy has a question for you," Lily announced, unable to contain her excitement. Nathan stood, pulling a ring box from his pocket. "5 years ago, I was going to ask you this question. Life took us on a different path than we planned, but we found our way back to each other. We've built something real, something honest, something strong enough to weather any storm. Victoria Hayes, will you marry me?" Victoria looked at the man she loved and the daughter they shared, at the life they had built from the ashes of broken dreams. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she said, pulling them both into her arms. 1,000 times yes. As they embraced, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Victoria thought about all the ways their story could have ended. The lie could have kept them apart forever. The pain could have been too deep to heal. But instead, they had chosen courage over fear, honesty over pride, and love over everything else. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been theirs. And standing there with her family, Victoria understood that sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that survive being broken and are put back together, stronger in the mended places than they ever were before. The secret that had driven them apart had ultimately brought them back together. And this time, nothing would tear them apart again. The end.